Hey there, athletes. Coach John Ferry here from Team Whoopers. As always, excited to welcome you to the Week 8 athlete briefing for our Spring Run Challenge and Week 4 for our half marathon off-season group. So as always, we're going to start with our week in review. So our half marathon off-season crew. So we're putting a little bit of zip back into your week with that light progression runs. Hopefully it feels good after a couple pretty light weeks to get a little bit of just pace right above that easy pace, starting to push up to that marathon pace. So for me, it always feels nice to come back in. And then we're just continuing to put a little bit of volume back into your week, bringing that long run to a pretty substantial 90-minute long run. That's one for especially my endurance athletes. I love pinning 90 minutes. It's just a steady state long run. If you're maybe in between seasons or don't know exactly where you're going, it's a very substantial kind of run to keep on the calendar. But if you're an endurance athlete where half marathons or marathons are kind of your bread and butter, that's kind of where I want my baseline for most athletes to be, 90 minutes. So our Spring Run Challenge, 45-minute anaerobic capacity workout was our first run of this week. 5 by 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off. So this is the pinnacle of this progression. Is certainly the hardest one we've had thus far. Probably the hardest workout of the whole challenge. Depending upon the type of athlete you are, you might have found some of the longer hold VO2 max intervals a little bit harder. So it's up there for sure. It's a challenging workout. Second key run of the work, 45-minute race pace run. So this workout, we're going back to that pace that you ran in week 1 in that first 20-minute distance test, refamiliarizing yourself with that pace, hopefully getting ready for the 20-minute distance test coming up next week. And then finally, our third key workout of the week here, that's 60-minute endurance run. Nice and easy, as always, hopefully the most fun workout of the week. So Carly Graham will be joining me here, try to get her in. Sit. Remind everyone, as always, that although we're coming to the end of this challenge, make sure you continue to go onto that website, check the box, always be chasing that 100% completion percentage. Hello, Carly.
Hello.
Hey, we coordinated with no planning at all here. Love when this happens.
Look at that.
We're thriving.
Of course. It's Friday. It's a nice day. It's actually hot up here. It's wild. I'll take it.
Yeah, it's amazing outside. Well, we're going to jump right into the upcoming week workouts. In particular, one I'm sure everybody's going to really want your opinion. I'm excited to hear your opinion. So for the half marathon off-season crew, next week, we're adding a little bit of incline back in, but doing it in a very easy manner. So I know you all are pretty typically used to when we put incline work, we do it with a little bit of intensity. This is still our comeback pattern, week 4 of comeback patterns. It's just going to be adding incline in at easy pace. We're going to start to pin the intensity. Never love to adjust two don't like
it's not
to
working
adjust
for me today.
Two intensity markers at the same time. So volume is one thing, intensity is the other. So we're going to start to pin volume instead of increasing it any further. And I was talking about wanting to pin it at 90 minutes so that in a couple weeks when Summer Challenge starts, start to bring back in intensity. For our Spring Run Challenge crew, we're starting the week 30-minute VO2 max workout. So this is your race week or test week. So I know Carly actually last time she was on here, I think we're talking about preparing for some events like this. So we're pulling back, but we're not pulling back all the way to easy. So this is a workout you did actually all the way back in week 1, if you remember. It's just instead of these 2, 3, 4-minute intervals, we're just going to touch on 1-minute intervals. It's just to stay sharp early in the week. Second key workout of the week, 30-minute endurance run. So this is the moment we're pulling way back. This is not a moment to get kind of overly excited or ambitious to try to add more, to try to sneak in a final progression run. This is the moment to start resting up because there's a big test coming over the weekend. So speaking of the test, so Carly, I have talked at the front and back end of these challenges for over a year about this 20-minute distance test. So it is well beyond time for people to get a fresh voice on how to go about it. And I actually have a feeling that your advice might be totally different than mine, which I'm very excited about. So I want to start off with how would you prepare? And this could be just the morning of, the breakfast, the night before, but how would you go into like basically preparing for either a 20-minute distance test or a short race, which in essence is what we have here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with something you just said too, in the sense of like the work is done. Don't try to be a hero this week. And I know a lot of people are like, well, what if I just try like one more work? You're just wasting energy at that point. I always try to tell people like within 2 weeks, a week and a half of the race, like there's no muscle building and micro tear and strength building happening within 2 weeks. So in the last, like leading into it, just kind of trust what you've done and try to taper out and don't waste energy. Anything extra you do, you're going to waste energy. So that kind of being said, the week of, I totally would say a primer, like use those 1 minute intervals to try to like hone in on a pace you want to maybe go or feel, to create that brain connection with your body of like, hey, this is what this pace should feel like, and this is what I want it to. Obviously sleep is always important for recovery, always some sleep, maybe some extra recovery work, foam rolling, mobility, more than you usually would have done. Don't try something new. If you don't do yoga, don't do it the week before because someone told you it was good. Wait until maybe a different time to do that. Depending on, like, again, race, let's say like day before, again, I'm a 2 days off before race kind of person. I mentioned that last time. Like usually I like 2 days before off, the day before I do a quick little tune up, and then I like a 20-minute shakeout run, not a workout, let's be clear. And then the day of, we kind of go into the race. Morning of, that's kind of person dependent. I would say don't try new food. Don't try, again, like eat maybe a small something before you go. But I think overall, just trust what you've done. I can't stress enough. I know a lot of people like to like, let me just do that one last time to see if I can hit that pace. Like, no, it's not the time to do that. Let yourself go out there and trust your training. For like week leading up tips, I'd say that's pretty much it. Hydrate. Even though it's short, it might be 20 minutes, might be short. If you do run half marathons or something like that, it's still, you're still burning a lot and you're still sweating a lot in that short period of time. So preparing for it in that way is still important.
Got it. So on a more physical kind of standpoint there, like it's morning of, you've done it all right. You've kind of nailed your routine. You practiced your routine in training. What are the things physically you're doing to like prepare your body to take on that pretty heavy strain?
Yeah, so I would definitely still do a warm up, like before your workouts. You've always done a warm up, so like still something. Maybe it doesn't have to be as long, but like personally, it takes me a while to get moving these days. So like I'm a couple miles before I start. Maybe it's a 10-minute warm up, again, 20-minute run, whatever works best for you. Get your body warm before you start. You don't need to do a 45-minute warm up, but you can do something just to get your legs moving and that kind of warm up in that way. I would then usually stop after my warm up jog and I would do some of the warm up drills, like do some high knees, maybe some butt kicks, do any sort of drills that you have maybe done in the past before an event. The lunge matrix stretch, that can be done, I would say, before you leave the house. Or again, you could always stop after the warm up, do a couple more of those movements just to kind of get your hips to open up and make sure they're moving. But you want to be warm, I think, and especially in a shorter distance race. Again, if you're running, just comparing it to like a marathon or an ultra marathon, which John just did 50 miles. Good job, John. But that kind of idea of it's a shorter, kind of faster, like if it's a 5K, you want to be warm. You want to be warm going in, especially if you're not going to start off at like an easy pace. If you're going to push yourself for this 20-minute test, you want to make sure that you're doing an adequate warm up before, do those lunge matrix, do all those things just to get the blood flowing before you start.
Perfect. Yeah, because I want to jump a little bit into like tactics of the test itself then, and something, I've talked about a little bit in the past that it's like, we'll call it a minor pet peeve now 1 year in. As I see all the time people's comments, they're like, well, I started pretty conservatively and then like I pushed and I like went up a little bit, which is great. Negative split racing, we've talked a lot about it in the half marathon and the marathon. Absolutely. 20-minute test, I don't know. Like I don't love it. I don't like, not that I don't love negative splits. I don't necessarily love like being like, well, I'm gonna like plan to start out a little bit, comfortable and then like see where I can go. In essence, once again, you've run a zillion 5Ks, Carly, zillion, yes. It's a hard race. It's hard from the start, which is why we talk so much about the preparation, getting your body warmed up. Like I even remember in one of Ned Keflezighi's books, and he's a marathoner, and talking about running 3 to 4 miles, very easy before he lined up to start the marathon. And similarly, as he got deeper into his career and approaching 40. He said it took a little bit longer to warm up. So it takes a long time. And you were a track athlete in college. Like, those athletes go and spend an hour warming up for the 200 meters.
Yeah.
So, as the intensity ramps up, so does the warm-up time. And so, everybody's got to be a little bit personalized too. And it's not by accident that I don't get super specific on what I want people to do for those warm-ups. As kind of Carly alluded to, you have to kind of figure the things out that work for yourself, and then you mimic that thing time and time again. So on a kind of strategic point then, so Carly, you're coming in, you got your 20-minute distance test this week. Like, I want to know how you personally, so you can separate this from how you might coach an athlete, but how you personally are kind of doing minute 1 to 20. You don't have to break it down in 20 sections, but how, like, the pace you're starting at, the pace you're hoping to finish at, and what that looks like.
Actually ran a 5K this week.
Perfect.
wasn't my best, but it was good to get back out there.
I bet it didn't take 20 minutes either.
But so what I would say too, I definitely am a negative split person to say. Great. In that sense of like for any distance, in the sense I'm not a Coach Emmy loves the go out hot and hold on method for herself, and we've always had these talks about that. But we race together and we both go at completely different starts, and we end up at the same place in the end. And it's one of those, we're finishing together, but she went out and then anyways. So for me personally, and I've always tried to race like this, one thing to know is I do say it's going to be hard from the start. You're not running, if you're running an easy pace marathon, or if you're, again, me personally, I always have to try to mentally accept this is going to be uncomfortable from a half mile in, or from 5 minutes in, let's say, if we're talking about the 20-minute test. And wrapping your head around that and preparing for discomfort, as I kind of mentioned last time, is a huge piece of being able to digest that you're going to be uncomfortable for a prolonged period of time. So for me, I personally would say is like, I do like to get a little bit quicker potentially each time, because physically, like, it's less painful. Yes, it's going to be painful no matter what, as I'm saying. But building up a ton of lactic acid in your legs and then trying to hold on to that like type of buildup is not going to allow for the most appropriate muscle contraction, versus it's going to be hard, but keep trying to make it hard by pushing through that discomfort. So like I would go out at this is going to be hard. This was my building into my goal pace. If my goal pace was, let's say, a 9-minute mile for this 20-minute test, I would probably go out at like 9:05. Okay. 9:10. I'd go a little bit slower. Knowing that like I'm not so far out of reach that I'm going to have to make up all this time at the end, but I'm not totally going out 20 seconds under my goal pace. So I'd probably go out at 9:05 if my goal was 9-minute miles, let's say. And I would probably, for a 20-minute test, I would break it up into 4 or 5-minute segments mentally. That's how I would digest it. I would say, I'm going to break it up into 4 or 5-minute segments, and at every 5 minutes, I'm going to check in, because digesting 20 minutes of discomfort is much harder than digesting 5 minutes of discomfort. So I would say you're going to say the first 5 minutes, a controlled hard pace. If you're trying to go for speed, hard pace. It's not going to be easy, but maybe a little bit slower than that goal, but you're holding on. And at the 5-minute mark, you drop those shoulders, you shake it out, you check in with yourself, and you say, how do I feel? Did I go out too hot? If I did, cool it a little bit. Maybe I went out at 8:40 instead of 9-minute pace. Maybe I'm going to try to go to 8:55 for that second 5-minute segment. So like still stay within range, but like pull back so you're not totally killing yourself. Just like any race, I think the third quarter of any race is the hardest. So I would just say for this 20-minute test, like for me, when I ran a 5K earlier this week, I knew mile 2 was going to be the worst. I already know that, because mile 2 of 3 miles is always the mental mile, right? You're starting to feel tired. You know you have one more left, and you know that you want to hold on to that pace. By the time you hit the 3rd mile, you're like, all right, suck it up. You got one more to go. And the same with this, that third 5-minute segment of the 20-minute test is when you really need to like get out of your head, dig deep, and really try to think like, okay, look around you. Look, if you start to think about how much, quote, discomfort you're in, I always tell people, if you're starting to get internal, start to think external. So like, I always try to look around me. I'd be like, oh, look at that tree over there. Look at that bird over there. Because then you're not focusing as much on how much pain you're in. So I would say in that third segment, that's when you really try to go outside your head. And in the last 5 minutes, just drop your shoulders, stay controlled. And that's when you take those quicker steps and really try to hone in on that pace. Again, if your goal pace is 9 minutes, I'd say maybe 9:05 for the second chunk, maybe drop into the 9s and then try to finish a little faster. If you've been training, like the coaching has been prescribed, you've been going faster than that goal 20-minute pace. You should know where that next gear is. That next gear is that anaerobic capacity, that long, again, that fast, quick pace that you've been practicing. So your legs should know how to move faster than that pace. And I would wait until the fourth quarter, like that last segment, to really kind of dig deep and pull that out of the socket. But I would say still not going out hot and holding on is not my favorite. I would just say going out at a pace that you know is going to be uncomfortable, but see where you're at. Pace yourself. Again, it's one of those, I know I'm like a minority of runners that have only negative split marathons. It's one of those things. It's the only thing I feel like I have done in a marathon that I like, but it's one of those things that going out for physically, the amount of lactic acid and inflammation that forms from going out too hot and trying to hold on is not worth the pain, because it goes right here. Oh my God, this hurts so bad. How am I going to hold on? Next thing you know, you're so far in your head that you've lost your pace. So trying to go out a little more controlled, and then slowly going as you go. Sorry, that was probably more long-winded than we wanted to hear, but
no, that's perfect.
That's what I think when I do races, at least.
Listen, as I'll tell you, I am 1,000% confident. I have never negative split a marathon, and I'm confident it's not in my body to do so. So
it's a lot up here, and again, I'm a mental runner too. We're all human. Like, I used to do that. I would get in the second chunk of a race and be like, wow, this hurts. I don't know if I can go any further. And then next thing you know, I'm making the pain worse by telling myself it hurts. Like, and then next thing, you're out of the game at that point. If you mentally kind of tap yourself out, and especially in short races, you don't have time to like try to get back. And so it's like you have to try to tell yourself this is going to be uncomfortable, but you're okay. You're okay, and it's going to be hard. And that's where I just really think honing that in short distances is like prepare yourself for the discomfort, because if you don't, you're going to surprise yourself and just tap out.
I couldn't agree more. The amount of times, and I think this is actually super useful because we have like our half marathon off-season crew, and everybody's based on this 20-minute distance test. And there are a lot of reasons why it ended up being a 20-minute distance test as opposed to 30 or whatever. But the practice of these like 20-minute tests not only helps like make sure we have like paces that are in good relationship with fitness, but the exercise of it is crucial for every race distance, of knowing how to find yourself in a place that's uncomfortable and either make an adjustment, an in-race adjustment, or push through it and get to the next phase. And this is absolutely where you learn those things. So then, I have my athletes, I try to push them all the time. I say race early and often. That's what I want to hear. Races for all distances, where I'm like, you go out and you screw up, here, no problem. If you train for 6 months and you show up and you've done all this work for this one thing, and you do in essence what I've done a million times, which is run the first mile so fast that the rest of your race is like immediately sabotaged. That's a lot riding on months of training. So you do it every 2 months, every 8 weeks, just touch base, and you learn how to race. So I think so much was right there, super smart stuff. I think everybody can take. So you kind of mentioned the breaking it down into segments, which I'm a huge fan of. I was kind of curious. So people are doing this in all sorts of different ways, right? Like we've got treadmill, do it on the track, you could make a road course. Once again, I'm only for you. How would you, if you were going outside this weekend and you're planning your own 20-minute distance test, like how would you plan that route out so you had the ability to like have those segments for yourself?
I plan it on a place with not traffic.
Yeah, sure.
Try to find a path or canal. I know that seems crazy to think about, but like the last thing you're going to want to do is be like, oh my God, there's a car. Now I have to stop. What do I do now? It's going to jumble you all up. So I would try to find, personally, there's a canal path, a river path here in Rochester. So I would honestly find small loops of an area that is controlled. If I were to do a 20-minute distance test, I might estimate what pace I'd go and know, could I find a place where I'd do a couple loops or two, like that kind of thing. Flat, elevation wise, try to find something flat. I'd try to find something flat. Sure. And I think whether for me, I'd find a flat straightaway that I knew I could do for 20 minutes on like a canal or something I could do. Like if I was in New York City, so you could do the Reservoir, Central Park. Does it get boring? Maybe. Or you could do the West Side Highway, straight shot for 20 minutes as fast as you can. Yep. I like track running. 20 minutes is a little long, but it's one of those where I do think that If you don't mind the track, it's really easy to calculate pace if that's something you want to work on. That's why I think tracks are great if you're one of those side note people that's working for learning to pace and you have a hard time with pacing. Like as John said, like the only way to get better at racing is to race and fail to learn what you did wrong to get better. I hate to say it, you have to fail. If you never fail, then you're never going to learn how to improve it. So it's one of those things that learning what the mistakes are. Oh, I went out too slow there. I had way too much left in the tank at the end. Great. Then you know for next time that you can pace it faster from the start. But the only way to do that is how many races I went out way too slow and then I kicked at the end and I had way too much left. How many races I went out too fast and I was a mental case. You're going to do both. But for route, I would say look for traffic, look for, again, loops or something that you can calculate if you want to have that calculated. And I'd look for a flatter road if you want to kind of take elevation out of the strategy. If you're training for something hilly and that's something you want, then add in some hills. But again, and don't prepare yourself to think I'm going to do something wrong. You can't go in with this mindset of like, this is going to be awful. It's just one of those things that if something goes away that you didn't want it to, it's not bad. It's one of those where it's like, wow, that was a really good learning experience. Are you maybe going to be, oh, that was annoying, I should have gone faster? Maybe. But the best thing to learn from that is like, oh, wow, like now I really know I should have gone out slower and I would have felt maybe better by the end, or I should have gone out a little quicker because I felt like I had way too much left in the tank. And you'll learn as you keep doing it. And that's why it is good to like have it in the beginning of an end of a cycle and have it be things you test throughout.
Yeah. So, I know I picked a little bit on negative pacing or negative split pacing, which ultimately I think it's mostly just because of jealousy that I've never been able to nail it. But I'm the only coach out there, I think, in the world right now that's like still like a semi-advocate of positive split racing. And what I have talked about in the context of this challenge, it just reminded me of what you brought up, is occasionally that's exactly what I want athletes to do to make sure that they're not too conservative, is I will send them out if they have a long history of racing. And honestly, like, I don't really care what the result is I've done it myself personally, and I'll have like the right athlete do it at the right time, where I'm like, if I think 9-minute mile was the example pace. So if you're like, I'm pretty sure I can do better than that, where I'm like, great, well, let's start out at 8:45. And you might at mile 2 the wheels might come off of this track, or kind of the one upside of this like positive split strategy is you just don't slow down. You're like more fit than you think. And you can't always learn that unless you take a chance from time to time. So 9 times out of 10, I think, I would go with Carly's strategy. That's certainly what I have like recommended at the end after I kind of, every single time, I think, is like plan that negative split. But if you're feeling, super fit and you want to like get the best, like really like go for it, I think there are those times where it's kind of Carly was saying, it's like, don't be afraid to fail. It's, you can do this again in 2 weeks. It's not such a long test that you have to wait 6 months and try again. You can do it in 2 weeks. And at that point, maybe a different strategy if things didn't go well. So it's a great exercise, not only to do for, it's a good workout, if nothing else, great exercise to learn how to race, learn how to pace, see how things are going. So all in all, great tips all around. So we're
positive splits for positive people. You know what I mean? I like to say that. No, it is good. You do have to, and that's another thing too, is if you do feel like you have to listen to your body real quick. It's like one of those, if you're going at that conservative pace and you're like, my effort is not at my race pace that I want it to be at, and you're having a really good day, maybe you did take the proper taper this week, like, then go for it. Go for it. Push your limit if that's something you want to do. Absolutely. It's just those times when people go out really hot and they feel like crap and they're like, but I have to hold on. It's like, but like you don't have to hold on, like control it. And so it is hard. It's really hard. And it takes a lot of practice and learning. So. Yeah. And that's why I like 5Ks. You can do it again 2 weeks later, Marathons, you got to wait a little bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. But yeah, no, it's, knock it out all the time. So let's get to a few questions. So we took our sweet time because I think that was so critical. And once again, Carly, I appreciate it because I've just been saying the same thing forever. So you brought this like very fresh take on it. So thank you. So outdoor training. So any outdoor training advice as the temps begin to switch to warmer and more humid days?
Go by effort. Your pace should turn to effort. That's one thing I always say with workouts, which I know we talked about too, with like pacing and things like that, whatever your easy effort paces type of thing. But for example, even if it's a workout and it's really hot out and that's your time, you can do it. If it's supposed to be a VO2 max effort, you should know after you've done some workouts what that feels like. You should know what it feels like to go VO2 max. So if you start to go the pace, and let's say your goal is 9-minute mile, and you start to try to go there and you're at 9:20 and you're like, oof, my heart rate is already hot. It's hot. I'm sweating. Then stay at 9:20. You're still getting the correct cardiac load to build the strength in that zone. So I would say start to change your paces to effort, whether it's easy or a workout. Extra electrolytes, your muscles pump because of sodium and potassium. Like add in some of those extra salt and that kind of stuff into your life so your muscles can actually move through. If you're losing it quicker, your muscles aren't going to contract as well. And that's when we tend to fatigue. So extra hydration, go by effort. Don't be afraid. I mean, find some shade. Obviously, the less you're in direct heat, the less likely you are to feel like absolute crap. So it takes some time, just like it takes time to run in the cold. It takes time to adapt to winters. I don't know if y'all get winters, but we do. So it takes time to adapt to that. Just like it's going to take time to adapt back to the heat. So be nice to yourself. Don't be like, all of a sudden this is so hard. No, you should be slowing down, because if you don't, you're going to work your body too hard.
Yeah.
So.
It takes about 3 weeks to adjust to the warmer temperatures in general. And then there's a point where you're not adapting anymore. It just kind of is what it is. As Carly said, like it's harder. The issue is your heart rate is elevated because your body temperature is elevated, especially if you live in high humidity, which us here in the Northeast absolutely do. Your body can't cool itself. That sweat is bringing heat to the surface, and on a dry situation, it's evaporating. You continue to go through it. I mean, you have to replenish. And wet situations, it just sits there. Everybody is probably experienced this feeling at some point. It's leaves a lot to be desired. The only way to modify your workouts is to dial back pace. So I think before I've referenced the Tinman heat index chart. It's a Googleable thing out there. It does a good job with heat. I don't think it does any job with humidity, which makes things that much more complicated. But be super patient. Be willing to dial it back. Remember that the longer the workout, the more it affects you. So if you have a 30-minute workout or like a 30-minute main set with really high intensity, especially if they're recoveries, like you're actually going to be affected less in maybe that interval workout than you are on a 90-minute long run where you're like in the elements for longer and longer and longer. So dial back. Once again, Carly referenced, if you overdo it, your heart rate zone shoots past the target. Doing a totally different style of workout, you're going to get too much strain. So you just have to dial it back a little bit. I know on the page earlier, people were mentioning waking up early. Absolutely, sure helps to do it at 5:30 in the morning as opposed to 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the high heat of day. So if you're heat sensitive, which like myself, trying to make sure to take it to a slightly cooler time of day absolutely makes a big difference. And likewise, I have a jug of salt tabs behind me on the desk right now. So
I was going to say, you should know, like if you feel your forehead after running, it's crusty and salty, like you're a salty sweater. And like LMNT is a brand I love too. And it's like, unless you have high blood pressure and other health issues, I'm going to preface that, like you should be fine to be drinking some salt and adding some of that extra into your electrolyte kind of routine, because it is very important. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't need that much, but if you just lose hundreds and hundreds of milligrams of it by sweating it out, yes, you do need that back in your body type of thing.
Yeah, we'll go on a quick tangent, which is salt. I think is kind of like a 4-letter word as well. Like I was always very sensitive to it. I tried to keep it off of things, trying to be healthier. And it wasn't until I went and saw a sports nutritionist that she was like, you should be salting everything. Like you should be having electrolytes in your water, adding extra, like at your level of exercise. Like you need the salt in your food. So it all within reason, right? Like, but if you have, especially coming into summer months and you're racing and you're doing long runs, you do need that electrolyte. And great, just a little tip as Carly mentioned, which is, if you feel or see the salt stains on your skin or clothes, you're losing a lot during the course of that session. So you either need to replenish a ton before and after, or intra-workout as well.
I got my salt tested one time when I was in New York City, and they told me that I on every hour I should try to get 1,000 milligrams of sodium in my nutrition. 1,000. And I looked at her and I was like, how on earth am I going to be able to do that? But judging by the amount of sweat she took off my skin, and then tested how much my volume of sweat is, and she was like, how much do you sweat? I sweat a lot. So she was like, at least this much would make it so you're not getting so off balance to being lost. And I'm like, how am I going to get 1,000 milligrams? So it is surprising sometimes. Again, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but it is a little bit of an older school of thought to think that like, can't have salt, it's going to make my blood pressure spike. Like, it's one of those where you are losing more than you think. And I've seen people benefit from salt as their fuel during races, sometimes more than glucose. Like, it's just one of those where jacking up thousands of milligrams of sodium in a marathon, they didn't cramp, they didn't feel a wall, they didn't feel any of that. But again, not everyone's the same, but it could be a piece of a puzzle if that's something you're worried about.
Yeah. Which is a great transition. I have, I'm going to not give, I intentionally didn't give you too much backstory because I had some opinions when I first saw it. But so during my half last week, at mile 6 or 7, I became dehydrated. Started seeing double, felt like vomiting, stopped, walked to the water station and drank. I finished my race at an easy pace, but felt so defeated. What else could I have done prior or during my race to prevent this experience? I thought I did a good job at hydrating and fueling prior to the start, but it was my first half and I'm learning from the experience.
A couple of things is preloading and quality of hydration. Like preloading in the sense of like, get it in your body before you start, so you're not starting to be in a deficit from the get-go. If you're starting like, I'm hydrated, I just had some water, but then as soon as you start running, you're starting to lose it, versus if you're like, I took extra salt this morning. Like for me, I drank a packet of LMNT. I have an extra 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium in me. So by the time you start to run, you have extra in your body. So I would tell, if you're one of those people who you end up feeling that kind of dehydration feeling, drink, not like, don't chug it so you're starting with water sloshing around, you have to pee 2 minutes in, but maybe the night before you're drinking a little bit extra electrolytes, you have some on you, and don't wait until you're dehydrated to get water. Go get it. Go to the second water station and start drinking then. Don't wait until and this is where the walls, I don't think walls exist in races, by the way. I think they're either up here or we create them. But I think it's one of those that happens when it's too late. It's already too late. Your body's already like, I'm already depleted. How do I get back to where I was? So I would say drinking some more before, and the quality. If you're just sipping regular water without any electrolytes or anything in it, you're hydrating, but you're not getting, again, those different minerals that your body needs for muscle contraction, for your brain to kind of, again, all those electrical impulses to keep traveling. You need sodium and potassium to do that. You need all of that in electrolytes. So I would say drink some more before, and drink some during the race before you think you need it, and make sure it's high quality. There's so many brands out there and everyone's stomach settles differently. So everyone obviously can choose their own brand, but I would say beforehand, you want a little bit more, like that person who says like about you hit that mile, but you already was too late almost. Like, you want to try to think, I'm that person that has to start sipping mile 1. Don't let that happen. And if you start to feel like it's going to happen, maybe thinking more electrolyte heavy versus just plain water. Not that plain water is bad for you, but sometimes when people are like, I drank 64 ounces of water today and I peed every 5 minutes. And I'm like, well, you probably didn't take any of that in. You just flushed it right out. So having higher quality of water, putting those electrolytes in it.
Yeah, not to mention with a heavy amount of water, if there's not electrolyte balance, I mean, you're actually diluting your sodium levels in your body. So, which is what leads to was hyponatremia. Did I say that right?
Hyponatremia.
Yeah, I was like, oh, no,
low potassium.
Screwed up somehow.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I have a doctor here. So
no.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had an athlete one time who was a kidney specialist, and she would volunteer at like med tents for Ironman and marathons. She said, we test these athletes to finish. Like most athletes, more athletes than not, actually were overhydrated as opposed to underhydrated. So when I read this question, I was like, all right, I'm gonna be not throw anything in, but it's incredibly unlikely that you are, especially very dehydrated at mile 6 or 7. Even if the conditions were very hot, like more likely maybe that if you were like really being focused on having a lot of water, that you could have diluted some sodium. These particular symptoms are, pretty severe for a race. And the tricky thing is like, no idea, to be quite honest, like what could have caused double vision, nausea, walking and fatigue. Like could have been one of 100
there's
things.
100. Yeah, I was gonna say there's 100 things. Hydration is a piece of it because that's what they mentioned. But yes, were you going too fast? Was it hot out? Did you not get enough sleep? Was your heart rate really high because you're stressed and your cortisol is going through the roof? Like 100 different reasons for sure. I do agree with you on that.
Yeah. So I think important, since we're like, talking about, specific to this question, maybe it had something to do with it, but don't, over fixate on it. Go back into training and go back to your routines. And I know to practice the routines in training, practice your race mornings, practice using these 20-minute distance tests. So when you get to the race day, but yeah, for me, the first thing that came to it, and Carly mentioned it, is it sounds more like a situation where maybe the intensity was too high too soon, and your bodies don't respond well to that. We'll pick on Matt Wilpers. He went out and tried to run with Rebecca, Miss Gentry, on the NYRR Brooklyn half, and they started fast, and Bex is a better runner.
Yeah.
And
Olympic trials runner.
Yeah, she's no schmo. Matt, like he was not used to that pace, not used to that training. He had, poor stomach issue. He shared that info, so it's not, not proprietary information here. So that is a result of him going out at a pace that he wasn't comfortable with. Like physically, could he hold it? Yeah, absolutely. He's a beast, but he didn't have that like practice and stomach training ready to like hold that for a 13th and a 10th mile. So that would be my hunch, is that it's a little bit more based on like multiple factors than the hydration itself.
I agree. Could have eaten something weird. You never know.
All right. So we're gonna, Carly, I've taken you past the time, I promised you, but we have one more question, and it's, I feel like appropriate, since we, at the end of the day, are a coaching business. Someone had the question of, can you talk a little bit about when it's appropriate or advisable to get a coach? Love the challenge plans, have been doing them for a year, just wondering about future improvement after a marathon last weekend. So once again, I'm not going to color this at all. I'll just be interested in your opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's obviously your goals. As this person said, they might have goals for another race after running a marathon. If you have specific goals and time goals and or distance goals, and you don't have experience with personalizing that to you, like having someone guide you through that is 100% the way to reach that goal. The whole idea of spending thousands of dollars on races and travel and entry fees and shoes, and then not being able to get there because you trained them properly. People are like, I don't want to pay for a coach. And it's like, well, you just paid for all of those other things, and now you can't even go because the training wasn't catered to you. And I think that's the biggest thing with having a coach, is if you want to have a specific time goal, or I want to practice, I want to feel better going into that race, like that's where it's individualized to you. If you have a hectic schedule, get someone to work, because a lot of people say, I can't balance what should I be doing? How many runs should I do? What if I can't? Then have someone help you work around that schedule. That's what a coach is there for you. So I do think if you have a time goal, like personalizing times and efforts to you is like 100% how you're going to get there. Yeah. Do some people, when you're new to running, I hate to say it, if you're new to running and you've never have no comparison, and like, yeah, it's great. PR every time you run, right? Like it's one of those, that's easy,
Yeah,
but
it is great.
If you have a time goal and you want to try to get better at a certain thing, and everyone's different. Some people are high mileage runners. Some people are not. I had a friend in college, for example, we both raced the 1500, and she's now basically an elite athlete out West, but her weekly mileage was probably 15 miles a week less than mine because her body couldn't handle it. She used to get hurt. Mm-hmm. And when training was catered to her appropriately versus me, she didn't get hurt, but she was still faster. Yeah. It didn't matter, but everyone's bodies are different. Everyone's bodies are, again, can tolerate different things, and having someone who's done this for a long time and again, will know how to adapt that to you. They'll listen to your story. They'll listen to your times and your goals. So again, if you have that specific time goal, you feel like you've plateaued, you want to get better at something, you want to bring running to like a different level it's not at, like that's when you reach out to one of us, and like we can help you again get set up with a coach. But I think I need a coach. Like when I actually trained for Boston, I contacted Coach Jason Lakritz when I was working with him, and I was just like, I need your help. I don't know, like it's one of those where you need someone to help work around you. It's hard to do it yourself. It's hard to self-motivate too. If you're one of those mental runners, it's almost harder to do it yourself. Like personally, I'm a head racer right now. I'm not racing what I used to in college, and it gets in my head. And that's normal. That's normal. I'm willing to admit that. That's okay. It's just that idea. If I had someone I was working with, or someone was holding me accountable, like I'd feel better about it, because I'd feel like I had more purpose behind it. It wasn't just me beating myself up. So I do just think if one of those, if you do want to take a race to the next level, if you do want to work on a certain pace or time and you don't seem to be doing it on your own, you really do need to try to find like paces catered to you and make sure your workouts are at those certain efforts that will help you as a person get better. No one is the same. No one. Everyone has different paces and mileage they can tolerate. Like personally, if I tried to train for a 50-mile race, I'd probably get hurt. Every time I train for a marathon, I tend to get hurt. I could train for a 5K all year and I'll be fine because my body is built more for that shorter, faster twitch stuff. Everyone's built differently. So that caters like that kind of thing. You can't really compare to without a coach. And I know it's easy just to find a plan online and say, this is what I'll do. And I'll build up my runs 1 mile every weekend. I'm sure you'll get there. But if you want that new goal and that new step, like definitely getting that catering to your workouts is very important.
Couldn't agree more. And the only thing I'll add, Carly's probably heard me say it before, and the hardest thing, the one piece of information that I would want to share is there's this tough perception we bump up against all the time where people are like, well, I don't think I deserve a coach. Like I'm not that good, or I'm new. But that's kind of the exact time you want it. So everybody deserves a coach. Matt and I have talked about a lot in the past, like, finances were no option, and you'd want to build a team. You'd want your coach, you'd want your physical therapist, you'd want your strength trainer. And what in essence you're doing is, you're allocating the time and effort. Everybody can do it. Like I'll say, like I can write my own running workouts. You want to know how often it happens?
It's not fun.
Usually I'm like, I'll write it for an athlete and I'll be like, oh, this seems good. And I'll pull it back for myself. Is honestly how it goes. So you end up kind of unloading that, on someone else. And so it's actually cool that you mentioned, using Jason, who is a friend, peer, and colleague. And, that's as much as it needs to be sometime of just putting it on someone else to balance it, to be accountable to, those are the crucial things when coaching. So it happens at all levels, and it happens for sure when, you have specific goals that you want to achieve. As Carly mentioned, you can certainly, get that little bit of a adjustment to, take it from a group model to a personalized model. So I don't want to spend too much time harking on it, but that is the question that came in. It was a slow pitch for us, so we had to definitely take this opportunity to talk a little bit about our individualized coaching. And when Team Wilper started, Matt and I, there was only one level of coaching, and that was what we thought was really the critical part, and that was actually the athlete to coach communication. So in these group coaching models, we try to hang on to that shred as much as possible, where although we don't have that time to do one-on-one with everybody, is we want to make sure, and it's hence the reason we're here for this now 44-minute athlete briefing, is we want to make sure we're sharing information and talking so that we give as much as we can of that athlete to coach communication. That is the thing we hang our hat on for sure here at Team Wilpers.
Yeah. And newer runner, that's the one time when you need guidance. You don't know what you're doing yet. Running's supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be doing this for fun. And if you're new and you don't know what you're doing, it's confusing. It's stressful. You're like, was I supposed to do that? Was I not? Was I supposed to add another mile? What if I felt like that's the best time to add in some extra help, right? It's one of those where when you're new and newer, if you're like, I don't even know what pace I can run, it's the most fun to work with, because it's great, let's find your new limits, right? It's a fun time to build from. So I feel I know the perception is always oh, well, I'm not trying to qualify for Boston, so I shouldn't get a coach. And it's that means nothing. That doesn't mean anything. It just means that there's two different goals in two different people's trainings, but yeah, anyone should have that on their hands.
For sure. Well, we'll let everybody get back to their Friday, but this is, this is a wrap on Coach Carly here for this challenge. So thank you so much, Carly. Yeah. Your insight has been tremendously valuable, I think, for me, and I'm sure I have to imagine for everyone else. So hopefully we'll have you back for a challenge in the future at some point. But otherwise, to everybody out there, have an amazing final week. We're going to take a little 2-week break after this before we're back for summer. So get out there, crush those distance tests, and as always, keep those questions coming. But thanks again, Carly, and everyone have an amazing Friday night.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys, and have fun. Have fun with your little test. It'll be good.
All right, everybody.